In today's program, we interview Nell Stephenson. Now, apart from being an Ironman athlete, a marathon runner, a health and fitness instructor and a Paleo Chef, she's also the power behind the fantastic website Paleoista.com. Nell has a fascinating story. Nell turned to paleo in 2005 as what some might consider a last-ditch attempt at dealing with some mysterious GI issues that included endless visits to doctors and hospitals and virtually every test in the book and some that aren't even written down. And thankfully, adopting the paleo lifestyle ended virtually every one of those medical problems simply by omitting certain foods and focusing on the natural balance of local seasonal vegetables, wild proteins and natural fats, all in keeping with the paleo diet. Since then, Nell has refined how she looks after herself and has passed all that she's learned on to so many people through things like working with Dr. Cordain on writing the Paleo Diet Cookbook. So let's join Nell and Alain now as Nell reveals her secrets to living a great paleo life.
Good morning, Nell, and welcome to Low Carb Paleo Show. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
So, Nell, I found out about you last year while I was doing my research on paleo. And, of course, one of the first books I came across was Dr. Loren Cordain and the cookbook that came right next after that. And you participated in that. So that already put you on my radar. And then I wrote my book. And once I was done, then I followed up on some things. And I noticed that you were definitely up there in the pantheon of the paleo world. So I wanted to reach out and talk to you, and so here we are today.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. It's good to connect with like-minded people in the same space that are interested in cooking healthfully, but also in a beautiful presentation. And it's a very nice way to eat for people that are interested simply in eating a good meal, too.
It's always a pleasure to talk to people that have such knowledge. And since I'm a chef as well, you know, my focus typically is food and nutrition. I'm not as knowledgeable in the sports side of the business. Can you tell us a little about your background and how you came to paleo?
Yes. My background includes being very interested in nutrition and fitness from a very early age. I studied exercise physiology at USC. I was an athlete and I was loving my education, and at the same time I was very sick from the time I was a child through my early 20s, just plagued with GI issues. And although I knew that I was eating a healthy diet, or so I thought, as per my education, I continued to get more and more sick. And it wasn't until I had reached what I referred to as a tipping point, where I was regularly going to doctor's offices and GI specialists and hospitals, just trying to figure out why I was so sick all the time with stomach issues. And nobody could figure out what was going on, but nobody was asking what I was eating. And left to my own devices, I started doing some research online, and I realized that I had a gluten intolerance. And even though I was not tested, or I was not diagnosed with celiac disease, that didn't mean that the gluten wasn't still really causing a lot of damage. So when I cut the gluten out, I started to feel better in a matter of days. And I continued on doing the gluten-free approach for about a year, because back then at the time I thought that I needed all the gluten-free things as an endurance athlete, like gluten-free bread and gluten-free pasta and gluten-free, all the different things, you name it. And even though I felt better not eating the gluten, I still didn't feel fantastic. But I was starting to realize that if all this time for my entire life I was eating something that I thought was so good for me, which was whole wheat, was actually making me very sick, I wondered if there were any other foods that would fall into the same category. And sure enough, when I went back online to do a little bit more research, and I found Dr. Cordain's work, and it all made sense to me that some of the other foods I had been eating were also making me less than ideally healthy, like soy, and some of the legumes that I was eating. Part of my process included being vegan for 2 years, and when I was vegan, I was certainly eating more than my fair share of soy and gluten and that type of thing. So it's been an evolution, and it's been since 2005 that I've been following the paleo diet for myself, and I've never felt better, and that's part of the reason why it evolved to become such a large part, not just of my personal life, but also of my career as well.
I understand you wear many, many hats, so many that I'm just tired just trying to think of the different things you do. Can you tell us about the different activities that you do?
Yes, so my career has sort of evolved organically. I initially was focusing primarily on private fitness training when I first graduated, which was almost 20 years ago. And as I learned more about the paleo approach, I began sort of peppering little principles with certain clients, just starting with clients that mentioned that they wanted to lose weight or clients that mentioned they had some stomach issues. I would share some of the things that I had learned and realized that initially, these few clients that I was working with were starting to benefit from this advice, whether they were trying to lose weight or different health issues that they were addressing. And as it progressed, I realized it wasn't just certain populations that would benefit from eating this way. It was actually everybody seemed to be benefiting from this way. So back in 2007, I reached out to Dr. Cordain and sent him a letter saying, thank you for your work. You've changed my life, and you've also really made a significant impact on the way that I work with my clients. And that was the initial point of contact that I had with Dr. Cordain. And it's been an amazing opportunity to work with him on the cookbook and on the implementation program, writing for his newsletter, and just to have him to refer to. And most recently, we had the opportunity to be on the Dr. Oz show last spring, which was incredible. So the nutritional counseling has become sort of the core part of what I'm doing, both on an individual basis as well as with large corporations. I had an incredible opportunity last spring to go out to Hamburg to speak with the Airbus at their Global Leadership Symposium to help them understand how much the healthy eating would positively impact workplace productivity. And then along with that came more public speaking engagements. So now it's pretty cool to be able to work both with individual people on a local basis as well as internationally, and also to be able to implement, to work with corporations and reach more people on a larger scale. So it's been a really fun journey, and it's still in the making.
Can you tell us about the Paleoista?
Yes, Paleoista is the brand that I developed a couple of years ago, which is also the name of my second book. And the goal with Paleoista was to allow people to understand that it doesn't have to be all about the caveman approach. Certainly that is one way to do it. You can be a caveman, but you don't have to be. And I found with clients that sometimes they would hear the word paleo or they would hear the word the caveman diet and they'd be frightened because they thought, well, I don't want to be a caveman. I don't want to be Fred Flintstone. And you don't have to be. And I really want people to understand that really the essence of the true paleo approach is just about eating fresh, local, seasonal food and keeping it all in balance. It's nothing radical. It's nothing extreme. It's nothing crazy. It sometimes is perceived to be that way because there's lots of interesting to strange nuances popping up out of the woodwork that are using the word paleo, and some companies are actually starting to kind of just jump on the paleo bandwagon and use the word for foods that aren't even really paleo anymore. You see all kinds of things like paleo cookies and breads and treats and this and that. And my position on that is there's a place in the paleo approach for that. Certainly on a special occasion, it's nice to know that you can make a truffle. There's a recipe that I have on my site for a truffle, which is made out of raw cacao, almond butter, coconut oil, a little bit of honey. And knowing that you can make these types of things now and then is a great idea, but I think it gets taken out of context as one example where people are subsisting on these things on a daily basis. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to portray with the Paleoista approach is just it's a modern, healthy way to eat the way that our ancestors ate. In the words of Dr. Cordain, the point of the paleo diet is to mimic the food groups that our ancestors ate with foods that are readily available to us in our farmers markets, our grocery stores, and even in our own backyards.
It is possible to be a fashionable cave woman then.
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, if you take the word paleo out of the picture and you just suggest to people that they eat a lot of fresh, local, seasonal vegetables and they include healthy protein sources such as wild fish and pastured poultry and grass-fed meats and some healthy fat from avocado, olive oil, and coconut oil. That just, to me, sounds like a common sense approach. And I think sometimes using the word paleo, the way it's sort of turning into lots of different meanings for different people, sometimes it can be off-putting. And so with Paleoista, I want people to understand it's just about healthy eating and moving. In fact, the presentation I give is entitled Eat Food and Move, because it really is that simple. No matter how sick somebody is, if they begin to eat real food and take the non-foods out of their diet and start to move, incorporate some type of movement into their diet, chances are they're going to be at least healthier than they are right now.
My impression from looking at your site, and this is the way it feels to me, is that you're trying to portray the fact that you can be paleo and yet be feminine as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's another demographic I really want to reach out to. Not specifically, and not to say that I'm only trying to work with women or only trying to reach women, but that's one of the things that I do want people to understand is that, again, traditionally it feels like a lot of the different approaches to paleo have been more sort of the caveman diet. And in fact, most of the time when you see some reference to the paleo in the media, it's usually coined that way. So-and-so is following the caveman diet, whether they're talking about a celebrity that got ready for a role or somebody else that got healthy because they followed this way of eating. So yes, I want people to understand that you can certainly be feminine, you can be modern, you don't have to be a cave woman. This is just about eating healthy, real, fresh food.
On the more exercise side, can you tell us what you're currently involved and what you do to stay in shape?
Yes, I've been doing triathlon for quite a long time. I started doing short course back in 1998, and I love endurance athleticism. I still continue to race Ironman and half Ironman, as well as marathoning and ultra marathoning. And my takeaway message to people that visit my site or that might follow me on Twitter or read my newsletter is certainly not that everybody has to race triathlon or has to do endurance sport, but just that you're moving in some way, shape, or form. And in fact, when people ask me what's the best form of exercise to do, the answer is the same for everybody, only in as much as if you do it regularly, you'll be more likely to have success. So the answer to what the best form of exercise is the one that you will actually do. Anytime somebody tells me, I hate the gym, I just joined the gym, or I don't like playing, I don't like group activities, so I just signed up for such and such class. The idea is exercise should feel like play. So rather than force yourself to do something that you know you hate doing, think about how children look on a playground and they're laughing and jumping and having a lot of fun. And that's how the activity part of our lives should be. It should feel like play. So if you're doing something that you're trying to force yourself to do something that you don't enjoy and it feels like a punitive measure, think about what you'd actually like to be doing. And if you can find something fun, guess what? You'll be a lot more likely to do it.
I understand. My favorite form of exercise is napping. Is that acceptable?
Well, I wouldn't categorize it as a form of exercise. However, you bring up a very good point in the idea that rest and recovery is a very important part of a healthy approach to living as well. I think a lot of us can really easily overlook that part, and we can inaccurately categorize sleep as something that we can sort of cut down on if we need to get some more work in or fit in more things during the day. But I think that actually raises a really good point that we have to make sure that we are incorporating enough rest and recovery. But even for athletes or somebody who's got a very full workload, we've got to make sure we get our sleep in.
Yeah, for me the exercise of choice is dancing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, salsa or the rock or something like that. Any of those sort of fairly fast things are great as far as I'm concerned.
I couldn't agree more. Whatever it is that you enjoy doing, that's what you should be doing.
Mm.
Yeah, I was halfway joking earlier, but I do also enjoy dancing, and I walk, but I don't do any strenuous kind of exercise. I do pay attention to what I eat. I do get out and walk and play one of the French game called pétanque, and that's basically my form of exercise. Can you tell us more about sleep and maybe like meditation and such way of relieving stress in the paleo world?
My personal take on sleep and meditation and rest and eating, I think they're all very important keys to a healthy overall approach to living. I think taking time to make sure your sleep environment is set up properly is something worth addressing. Making sure that you're sleeping in a bedroom which is completely black, completely quiet, with the exception of a white noise, if that's something that you feel will help you sleep. I actually use an app that has white noise, and it has a little bit of an undertone of, I think it's called a binaural sound, where it helps sort of lull you into a deeper sleep. And just making sure you actually get enough hours per night. And also things like, if you do have a glass of wine now and then, try not to have it right before bed, have it with your meal, and time your food as far as when you're eating and between what the amount of time that will elapse between when you eat and when you go to bed, and not too much activity right before bed. If you do watch television, try not to have that in your bedroom. All these things collectively add up to a better night's sleep. Another handy thing to do is to download one of the sleep tracking devices, because it's easy to think that you're getting enough sleep if you go to bed at 10 and you arise at 6, but maybe you've been tossing and turning all night and you didn't actually sleep for 8 hours. Maybe you slept for 5. So just being aware of all these things are very important as an overall picture of your health. If you're not getting enough sleep regularly, it's very easy to compromise your body's production of growth hormone, which will then really compromise your ability to recover from activity properly. So all these things are really important things to address when you're looking at your sleep patterns. And then as far as the meditation, I think it's important that all of us include, tuning into breath and thought and that type of thing. And for me, it's only recently that I began to incorporate yoga more in a meditative type of approach versus the more workout type of approach. And I think it's good to be able to start incorporating it, even if it's for a small period of time. For years, the only time that I felt I would be able to meditate would be while I was running, and I still am able to do that. And to be able to start to learn how to sit in meditation, even if it is for a few minutes a day, it's a tremendously calming way to tune in and just sort of de-stress, even if it's for a little bit of time. But I think overall it's a great way to make for a more productive, more calm and balanced day.
Yeah, I noticed that if I if I rush out and I don't do my 30 minutes meditation in the morning, something is missing.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't feel centered the same way.
Yeah, I recently completed my the first part of my yoga teacher training, which is the 200-hour component, and just of course, the educational experience that I gained from that was tremendous, but the overall sense of calm that I took away was incredible, and just to feel so much more present and balanced, and to realize you can only do one thing at a time, no matter how busy you might feel, was a huge takeaway. So I think I can't highly recommend that enough.
Right. I've done yoga, and I should go back to it. But one thing that's important that our teacher was trying to teach you is that to focus on the moment, and you can't bring your problems, the outside problem, onto the yoga mat. You have to kind of leave that behind. So focus on the movements and the resting period at the end, and try to forget as much as possible the outside stress and events and so on and so forth. So it is, yoga in this case is very helpful too.
I couldn't agree more. And not only when you step onto the yoga mat, it's part of the practice to kind of focus in just on what you're doing at that exact moment, but also to take what you do on the yoga mat out into the world as well. So that calm that you feel and that balance. I mean, it sounds like kind of a silly thing to say, but can you imagine if everybody did yoga, how much of a more calm place the entire world would be? It's incredible to think about. And I was at the park over the weekend, and I saw the most amazing thing, which was a mom with 2 young kids, probably aged 7 and 5, and they were doing yoga, and then they sat in meditation. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And it's kind of unfortunate that things like that are not the norm, because they should be. Anybody can meditate. Anybody can do yoga. You don't need anything, any gear. You can just do it. So I don't know. I just encourage everybody to at least look into it. Again, even if you have the most hectic, most busy schedule in the world, even if you can find 5 minutes, it can be incredibly calming just to tune into your breath and focus inside for just a glimpse of time.
Can you tell us a little more about your chef side or your food side? I understand you're working on the book.
Yes, I am working on book number 3 is going to be coming out in January, and more to come on that. I consider myself mostly a self-taught chef. I did attend culinary school after I did my degree in exercise phys, but I've been cooking since I was about 4. And cooking for me is an art form. I love it. I highly encourage people to look into it. The nice thing about cooking compared to baking is you can be a lot more liberal, and you don't have to worry so much about measurements. I always use the example of if you're baking a cake, you can't exactly say, let's see what happens if I use half the flour or if I don't put the baking soda in. It'll be a disaster. With cooking, I honestly believe there are really only 2 things that you can not fix, one of which is burning something. It's pretty hard to mask a burnt flavor, or over salting. But in the paleo approach, we're not salting. There's a few exceptions, I think, with using salt in the paleo diet. But as a rule of thumb, we're not salting stuff. So other than that, it's just kind of a fun mix and match experiment. You might make a dish with salmon and sun-dried tomatoes and basil and realize that you thought that combination might also work really well on chicken, or you realize that the other dish you made, you probably used a little bit too much tarragon, and next time you'll go for another herb. But it's kind of a fun work in progress. I also teach cooking classes at a local boutique culinary academy in Santa Monica, which is a lot of fun. So different classes that I teach, usually about once a month.
I do appreciate the more freedom part of the cooking side of business, but originally I was trained as a pastry chef and a baker. So for me, it's all about precision and about following, because pastry making is all about chemistry. So if you try to be a little too creative on one end, you can actually come to disaster. But
yeah.
I expressed my creativity on the cake decoration side. So that was how I released that creativity instead of the cooking. There's always been in kitchens, in professional kitchen, there's always been a war between the cooks and the pastry chefs, because the cook are saying, you pastry chef are too uptight, and us, the pastry chef, we always say, oh, well, you cooks are so messy.
Yeah.
There's no clear path, and so it's also probably a function of how one's approach life or his mind is organized too. Cooks maybe tend to be more free-flowing, creative type, and then the pastry people are more, they're creative in their way too, but in a more structured way.
Yeah.
So what else are you involved in right now that you're excited about?
I am just about to open my paleo lifestyle studio here in Los Angeles, which is really exciting. It's something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and to have a home base and use sort of as a little experiment. It's really exciting. I will continue to offer the one-on-one nutritional counseling, as well as some educational series, including a monthly, I'm still deciding what type of classes I'll be offering, but things along the lines of Paleo Education 101, Paleo for Women, Paleo for Athletes, as well as hosting guest speakers that have similar things to offer on a complementary basis to what I'm doing. So it might be a guest speaking on breast cancer awareness or mindful meditation, tuning into your breath. These things are all in the works, and really, really excited to have a home base to begin to offer these things.
Yeah, it sounds great, actually. I wish there was such a studio in Austin, but hopefully you can spread that kind of attitude towards other yoga studios. Obviously I haven't explored every single yoga studio out there, but typically they're just focused on the yoga part and not on the whole body health attitude. So it's a very good way for you to do that. You kind of create a community and help people to realize that there's a lot more to than yoga. There's a complete picture and the holistic body.
Yeah, and I will. I forgot to mention that I I will also be offering small group yoga and individual classes in the studio. So it'll be a balance of the nutrition, consultation, education, and some movement as well, which is a nice balance to all the other activity that people are involved with.
Taking you back a little bit, sort of almost a decade, I should think, back to when you were doing following a vegan diet for those 2 years. You said that didn't actually do a lot for you. How strict a vegan were you?
Very strict. I wouldn't even wear, I mean, no honey, no leather, no wool. I was actually really, really hardcore about it. And this was about from the year 2000 to 2002. And it's interesting because I began it for ethical reasons and health reasons. I was, my stomach issues had progressed pretty badly by then. So I have to say I came from a background where I wasn't eating a bad diet in the first place. I always talk about the fact that my mom was a hippie, so the diet we ate growing up was largely focused on no preservatives, no sugar, lots of vegetables, lots of fruit. However, we certainly ate whole wheat. We certainly ate organic dairy. We certainly ate lots of beans. So all those things collectively, I think, didn't help, whatever stomach issues I already had, even as a very small child. So I tried the vegan approach, and for about 6 months, I felt pretty good. But then I started dreaming about fish, and I would go to bed and dream about eating fish and wake up feeling horribly guilty because I really felt at the time it was ethically wrong. So it's not to say that one day I woke up and suddenly started eating steak. It was a very gradual transition. But after about 2 years, I finally did begin eating fish. And for me, what the balance was figuring out that the importance of sourcing the proteins was actually the key. And I do now feel that, or not just now, but for a while, I've came to the conclusion that for myself, I feel that humans are at the top of the food chain, and we are meant to be eating animals and fish, but at the same time, not at the cost of animals being treated inhumanely. So I think making sure that the fish are always wild, making sure that the meat is always grass-fed, making sure that the chicken is always pastured. Free range doesn't cut it because, unfortunately, free range doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. No. Just making sure that the animals were raised the way they were supposed to be raised, killed in a humane fashion, and eating appropriately, I think, is actually the best balance for everybody. And it's funny because I've had a lot of people reach out to me who are vegan who've said, I really think I need to start eating protein. I'm craving it, and I really don't know how to do it. And even people they reference the fact that their whole community is vegan and they don't know how to tell others that they're thinking about eating protein. And it's a difficult transition for sure. But it seems like a lot of people end up feeling a little bit more comfortable eating wild fish. And I've sort of jokingly started to refer to fish as the gateway protein because just once we start eating the fish, then it sort of it feels a little bit less alarming to gradually start eating pastured poultry and that sort of thing. And a lot of times people will say, well, I only want to eat fish. Can I still follow a paleo diet while only eating fish and not eating red meat and not eating poultry? And yes, that is possible. Ideally, the more balance is better. However, just fish on paleo would work. What doesn't work, though, is sometimes I've seen interesting combinations referring to a vegan paleo approach, which doesn't make sense. When followed properly, a vegan diet is actually similar to a paleo diet in that there's a large focus on eating an abundance of fresh vegetables and healthy. The fats can be the same. However, the protein source is obviously the huge difference because on the vegan diet, you're not eating any animal protein, and on the paleo diet, you're not eating any legumes or grains. So that's the key takeaway between differentiating.
Yeah. Contrasting your sort of time as a vegan and your time on paleo, what would you say was the biggest benefit you found from eating paleo?
Oh, I can't even begin to count the benefits. But first of all, not feeling sick every day. I mean, I was so sick with stomach issues. I was regularly going to the hospital, regularly going to to different GI specialists, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. So that's the first thing. But sleep quality, mental clarity, energy levels throughout the day, skin condition, performing in racing and training, weight loss, all these things collectively, it was almost like, you see those silly ads on late night television for products marketed towards, oh, take this pill, it will do these, 8 health benefits for you. And it's nonsense. It feels like a magic bullet that's never going to happen. But with paleo, it kind of feels like that, except in a true way, where you do get all these health benefits. Your sleep improves, your concentration improves, you're sick less often, you lose weight, your skin looks better. Any health issues you're dealing with get better. Sometimes they completely resolve, and sometimes they at least get better. And sometimes it's I think here's the key: it doesn't happen overnight. Most of us in America want a quick fix, and we want it yesterday. So somebody has gained 50 pounds over the last 5 years, and for some reason they feel they should lose it in a month. That's just not. It doesn't happen that way.
No.
The exception would be certain conditions you can see benefits from sooner than later on paleo. For example, if you have acne or other skin conditions, you'll start to see changes fairly quickly. Compared to neurological issues, if you have MS or Hashimoto's disease or other things like that, where they're involving more deeper tissue like neurological tissue, in the example of MS, it takes a lot longer to turn over than skin tissue does. So it takes a lot more patience, but it's still worth it for the long run, because we really do have the ability to heal ourselves with what we're eating. And I think that's the beautiful thing about paleo, is they're not pushing anything strange, no tricks, no gimmicks, no powders, no this, no that. The message is just this: if you eat what you're meant to be eating, your body will be healthier. That's it.
Yeah, no, couldn't be put better. You've been on a paleo diet for some 10 years now. I often ask this question of people that we chat with: if you could, knowing what you know now, go back and have a little pep talk with yourself, the you 10 years ago, is there anything that you would tell yourself to do differently?
As far as following the paleo approach? No. I think, let's see. The only thing that I think I would change is when I was first paleo, and I mentioned that period of time where I was gluten-free for a year, but still not paleo, and then I was paleo. Back then, I think I still thought I needed some grains to fuel my endurance training. So I still thought, certainly if I'm going to do a long bike ride, I have to have this gluten-free rice cereal, or I definitely need this gluten-free pasta the night before. And there was a little bit of me that was skeptical back then. I think that's just part of adapting to something that, you have to make some big changes for. But I think that's part of the process. So I wouldn't necessarily say I want to change it. But I'm so happy with this approach. It's just, there's so much to choose from. There's so much abundance, and it really is, it's a real bummer when I see it presented in any other way. There was just a piece on Good Morning America, the whole thing about, it's not something we can follow long term because of the deprivation and the low calorie, and it's not high enough in fiber because you're not getting the fortified bread products, and it's not high enough in calcium because you're not drinking milk. That is just such nonsense, and it really drives me nuts, because so many people who would benefit see that and think, oh, forget it. And then add to the fact that it's presented as a caveman diet, and that really seals the deal. Oh, forget it. I definitely don't want to try it, because I won't get enough fiber. I won't get enough calcium. It's too restrictive, and it means I have to be Fred Flintstone.
Yeah.
That's a great way to present something.
It is. Let me just sort of dive in on something there. So you are an endurance athlete, and you do some pretty hard competitions, but you don't carb load, you don't follow the I need carbohydrates routine then?
I do use extra carbohydrates when I'm getting ready for an event, but guess what? It comes from yams and extra banana and that type of thing. So I will fuel in advance. If I have a race coming up on a Saturday, say it's an Ironman race, and starting on Wednesday, I'll add more starch to my diet from yams and other starchy vegetables. Whereas on a normal day-to-day basis, I wouldn't have those foods because I'm not getting ready for a long endurance event. So the idea that we have to, pack in the pasta and the bagels and the peanut butter and the other issue that I have with one of the messages that goes out to endurance athletes is that it doesn't matter where you get the calories as long as you get the calories. And I've met so many people along the way who are doing Ironman, and they're literally eating candy. And their coach has told them, just get in the calories. It doesn't matter if you want to have candy bars, that's fine. And some people feel they get away with it in as much as they look lean and they're performing well for a period of time, but we don't know what's going on inside the body. And it just doesn't make sense. Even if you are performing at a very high level and performing well and you're eating junk, then that begs the question, well, how much better would you perform yet if you were eating real food?
Yeah.
So again, it's real food will fuel you and have far less negative consequences than if you're eating manufactured things.
A question that's not often looked at by many people I use the term the diet and fitness industry, and that's the difference between how men and women eat. What's your sort of take on the differences and how those differences should be catered for?
I don't think there's a huge difference between what we should be eating, as far as we both men and women should be eating a lot of vegetables. We should both be eating healthy sources of protein and a good amount of fat. And I think we should both not be eating manufactured items in packages for the most part. Certainly more women than men tend to ask me, what about calcium? And again, calcium is not an issue on the paleo diet because we're eating so many leafy green vegetables that are so alkaline to the body compared to drinking a cup of milk, which has a lot of calcium but is so acidic to the body that the net takeaway is, at the end of the day, we're negative on our calcium balance. And the calcium balance is far more important than just calcium in.
Yeah.
You have to look calcium in, calcium out. I think a lot of men will ask, well, can the paleo diet help me put on muscle mass? I'm trying to build muscle. And the answer to that is yes, naturally. It's not going to help you put on the amount of muscle that you would if you were doing a sort of a synthetic model where you're taking all kinds of synthetic supplements and eating nothing but protein powder throughout the day. That's just a different approach. And I'm not going to pretend to be a bodybuilding expert, but with the clients that I've worked with that have shared their experience coming from the bodybuilding world, safe to say that some of the things that they've done prior to working together on a paleo approach were a lot less than a natural approach. And that's what they had used previously to put on substantial amounts of weight in a shorter period of time, in addition to the weight training that they were doing. But I think ultimately we're all humans and we can all benefit equally from eating this really healthy, common sense way.
Do you find that because you cook, that you find following the paleo diet a lot more easy than people who just don't cook?
That's a good question. I think not necessarily. It does take more creativity if you are dining out more than if you're cooking at home, and getting comfortable with asking the questions. And obviously, if you are cooking all your food at home, you're a lot less likely to run into a case where you get glutened inadvertently or something like that. But it doesn't mean that you have to cook in order to follow a paleo approach. And there's lots of places that actually are coming up. More places are opening that are either paleo friendly or at least are aware of it so that you can, order appropriately. I just had an opportunity within the last year to endorse a menu that the Hyatt is offering in their restaurant here in Los Angeles, which with a little P, which means paleo approved, and that's something I'd like to be involved with as well, as to get that stamp, nationwide on the menu, because it's very common to see a GF on the menu. So anybody that doesn't want to eat gluten can just look at the menu and see which selections are gluten-free, as well as which selections are vegan or vegetarian. So why not have a P? Most kitchens could do that very easily without changing everything. And most restaurants, from little hole in the walls to really beautiful restaurants, have something on the menu, if not many things on the menu, that you can easily make paleo. Just ordering a filet mignon, and instead of having the butter mashed potatoes, maybe having some extra vegetables. So, or having a garden salad without the croutons on top and adding some chicken. I mean, it's really, really simple to do this pretty much anywhere you go.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Of course, as a chef being in the food business, I take a lot of things for granted, and a lot of questions that people that do not cook regularly would be stumped with. And people, when I mention the paleo diet, people give me this funny look. It's like, oh, that sounds like another restricted diet and everything. And I say, it's not. It's really, if you think about it, it's really a very simple diet. Proteins, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, stay away from processed food. Depending on your position, I'm personally not against dairy, but as long as you pick your source properly. But it seems like the media in general tends to make the paleo diet something very restrictive, potentially dangerous, which is not. But it's very difficult to convince people, regular everyday people that typically do not know how to cook or don't know how to handle food, to convince them that the paleo diet is really a very simple diet.
I agree, and the media does present it in a way just as you characterized it, like we were mentioning before, not enough calcium, not enough fiber, too restrictive, not sustainable for the long haul. And one of the things that I encourage people to do with cooking is to just start simple. So even if somebody has never cooked before, all they've ever done is boil water to make a cup of tea or use a toaster to make some toast. If you just start simple and, maybe the first week you have 3 proteins and 3 vegetables and you prepare those and that's your starting point. And getting the whole family involved, even the kids involved. If you do it as a group effort, everybody can be involved. Everybody's more likely to do it. And, and I don't, talking about convincing people, people usually seek me out because they're interested in paleo rather than me trying to sort of force what I think on them. But when I have somebody, just in casual conversation, somebody say, well, I eat gluten, I feel fine. I eat beans, I feel fine. I eat milk, I feel fine. Certainly, okay, that's fine. But, the challenge is if you can't actually get out of bed every morning and say you feel fantastic, then something might need to change. And the issue is for many people, their normal has become low. Every day they have a little bit of a headache. Every day their stomach feels a little off. They're not really sleeping that well. They're not concentrating that well. And this can largely be due to what they're eating or not and how they're resting and moving. So the challenge is if you can't honestly say you're sleeping wonderfully, your digestion is perfect, you're full of energy, you wake up with a spring in your step every day, then it's worth maybe doing a 30-day challenge with yourself. Just see how you feel not eating the foods that are not part of the paleo diet, and then choose to, if you want, test things one at a time and see how you feel. And that way it's the best information you have for yourself. So much more important and relevant than anything a doctor will tell you or read in a book. If you know, for example, that after 30 days of eating paleo and you tried that piece of pizza and you woke up with a terrible migraine headache and a stomach ache, or you had a piece of cake and you woke up and your skin was just covered with pimples and you had an acne breakout, whatever the case may be, that's the information for you to put together. When I eat this food, this is how I feel. Therefore, I will eat it, or therefore I won't eat it. And that's really, I think, the biggest takeaway. There's nothing to lose by giving it a try. And if you're not interested, then no need to.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with you, but we also have to realize that a lot of people are not aware enough of the status of their body, and they think that however they feel is normal. And so there's also a need to remind people to pay attention or to be aware of what their body is telling us. And a lot of that is lost because a lot of people act mechanically and do not pay attention to their feelings and how their body is trying to send them a message. And that's also part of the teaching we should try to do as well.
I agree. There's a huge disconnect between what people eat and how they feel, which is alarming, but that's true. People don't think right away about what they're eating unless they have a stomach ache. But they don't think, oh, I have a migraine headache, what am I eating? Oh, my joints are hurting, what am I eating? I'm not sleeping well, what am I eating? It's more sort of like, I don't feel well, I'll go to the doctor, and the doctor's not going to ask what you're eating either. No. So it's we kind of have to be our own resource and really tune into what you're eating first. That's the biggest takeaway that I would want to impart on anybody that's listening is if you're not feeling great, number one step always should be what am I eating, and keep a log for a few days and see how much of the food, and even if you don't have an expert look at it, just look how much vegetables are you eating, how much processed foods are you eating, how much water, when am I eating, are you eating enough throughout the day, are you getting enough protein, are you getting enough fat? All these things can factor in.
Part of the job I do as a counselor too is that I ask them to do a food diary to track down the food that they eat and then try to connect that with how they feel afterwards. Yes. And surprisingly enough, I don't know if it should be in your experience, but a lot of people are actually resisting writing down the food diary and for me to read it. And, I can't do a diet analysis unless I know what they eat,
Of course.
literally at all times. So, but, in some cases I feel it feels more like pulling teeth than, or they would rather give me their bank account number than let me see their food diary.
I agree. Yeah, they're embarrassed sometimes. They don't want to tell you what they're eating, but you need to see where the start point is.
And so we have this whole, in this society, in the American society compared to Europe in general, we have this whole relationship between food and us, which tends to be, there's a lot of guilt attached to it. There's a lot of negative emotion. And it's difficult to disconnect people from the fact that food should be not only nutritious, but it should be a pleasure. It should be supportive. It should be make you feel good, not just physically, but also emotionally. And a lot of people in this country equate food with guilt and, gaining weight and being obsessive about it. And, the paleo diet shouldn't be called a paleo diet. It should be just a paleo lifestyle.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, now that we've had a really fascinating chat for the last hour or so, obviously people are going to want to get to know more about you. Where's the best places for them to find out about you, about what you do, and how you can help them?
My website is Paleoista.com, and there you'll find links to my online store where you can purchase download plans. You can reach out if you're interested in doing a consultation and learn more about my studio in Los Angeles, as well as upcoming events. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, it's @Nell Stephenson, and my Facebook page is Facebook.com/Paleoista.
Thank you very much, Nell, for being our guest today and for giving such good information to our listener. And we hope to hear from you again one of these days. And until then, all the success to all your different adventures. And thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been fun.
Yep, thanks, Nell. It's been brilliant.
Thank you.
And like we say in Texas, à votre santé, yo.
Votre santé.